students, when they, when they are in their critical moments of making a choice, it could be right before they exit school. It could be maybe some of you in your second year, third year of engineering or other disciplines that you're studying. That's when you tend to have this sense of confusion about, am I studying, what should I be doing in the future once I've completed this course of study? Should I go for a job? Should I pursue higher education? Should I go in for an MBA, or should I go in for a technical field of studies, right? So many questions that come up, some of which are open-ended, like the ones that I talked about, and some others which might be a little more close-ended, like I know I want to go do an MBA within India, but I would like to find out how to go about, approaching that situation, or the other way around. I know that I want to go study economics, or a master's in a technical field outside of India, but I just want to find out which colleges, which universities, which locations are ideal to pursue a degree in that chosen field, right? So many of these career related questions, many of these outcome related problems that students face can only be solved if you consult, right? And I think an expert is somebody who is used by people across the board, whether it's an educational institution, or whether it's the workplace. Corporate environments tend to consult with experts all the time, right? So clearly there is something to do with expertise which really makes choices easier. And the second aspect of it is that mentorship goes beyond just seeking advice. Mentorship also includes an aspect of you sharing, of the mentor sort of understanding your context, and being able to relate your context with his or her own journey. And well, I don't know about you guys, but in my cohort, wherever I speak to, the people I come across, every single person says that the reason for their success can very clearly be attributed to a mentor, who gave them that advice that really hit home, that really connected with me, or that person, and that really spelled out success for them. So mentorship is what our platform offers. It gives you a wide variety of mentors that you can explore, and there are many services that are layered on top of this, which I will talk about very shortly. But the end objective is that you guys can connect with mentors on a one-to-one basis. Choose a mentor that fits your profile. Choose somebody who has studied in a college or a university or a geography that you would like to seek advice about, and connect with them on a one-to-one basis. And surely, I think some degree of that confusion would get cleared. In case you feel you're not sure about how to do this, well, we also have a mentor assist, whereby you can simply put in a request, and we will do the job of connecting you with the right mentor, right? So that's in a nutshell what we at Mentors Capital do. The idea is obviously to enable student aspirations, is to allow you to find your feet, get your queries resolved, and have some clarity on where your career, where your next steps are going to be. Well, in a nutshell, this is the kind of network that we are trying to build. It's trustly, it's a growing network. We're trying to add mentors every single day. I spent a greater part of every single day speaking to experts, speaking to mentors who would want to join our network and are willing to commit that time. So it's exciting times. You can see some of the top brands across the board. Whether it's geographies such as the United States, Canada, Australia, Europe, and many countries there. Even Asia is an area of focus for us. So Singapore. So across the board, many universities. Again, universities that some of them are technical, some of them are management related, some of them offer masters, some of them offer undergraduate, some of them are universities offering all kinds of programs. So it's a very eclectic mix of you know colleges, universities, as well as the kind of experts we have. Okay, and what is it that we offer? Well, I did say that we have a lot of services that we layer on top of mentorship. Well, you can either connect on a one-to-one mentorship. I think this is the most obvious. Get your profile evaluated, speak to him or her about your aspirations and your dreams, Does your background support a particular choice or not, right? These are all very, very personal, interesting questions that you should be asking and getting clarity on. Similarly, if you've already decided that this is the approach that you want to take, that these are the colleges that you want to apply to, well, we've got an entire team that is willing to support you in your aspirations, whether it's creating that impactful application for an Ivy League school, because end of the day, presenting your story is as important as having clarity on your story. So we help with all of that. We give you mock-ups as regards interviews and some of these writings assessments that schools conduct. So I think in a nutshell, we give you a service for pretty much every need that you have. And last but not the least is testing, right? A lot of top schools across the globe will ask you to submit either a test, either an English score, English proficiency score, or an aptitude exam like a GRE or a GMAT or an SAT or even a CAT, for example, in India, right? And these are exams that take rigorous preparation. So again, we run online courses. I myself am a quant and verbal instructor, and so deliver a lot of lectures online, and yeah, I think that's also a big service that we provide. All of this is layered obviously on top of mentorship, and I have an exciting offer for you guys before I pass on this to Kashmira and today's agenda. I want to leave you with this thought of, if we have this vast network of mentors on our platform, I give you this opportunity of reaching out to any mentor of your choice for free, right? All you need to do is go to our website, that's mentorscapital.com. Search for a mentor who suits your desires, your aspirations, or your background, and put in a request for a one-to-one mentorship. And I'm sure that it will clear up at least some idea of how mentorship works, and how this could aid you in your aspirations. All right, with that introduction, quickly, not going to waste time with giving you too much gyan, but one of the reasons why we are different is that our approach is different. That we believe that every step of the way, a mentor being involved, a mentor hand-holding the process, and a mentor leading the process could make a big difference. Yeah. Mentors Connect is a series of webinars for those of you who have joined in, who've been just about joined in. I quickly need to tell you about what MC Connect is all about. Well, it's a recent initiative. The idea is to get down speakers from diverse backgrounds, successful professionals, academicians, past students, to come and talk about their experiences, right? And these experiences go from the very basic of, why did you choose this program? Why did you choose to study, post graduation? Why study outside India? And some more specific questions like, how did you, create an impact on the interview panel? How did you, impress and get that coveted admit from a top Ivy League school, right? So plenty of knowledge to be shared. Let's keep it interactive so you guys can also get a first-hand feel of how mentorship works. In today's agenda is very, very specific. I welcome Kashmira. Kashmira, hi, welcome to this session. I think you need to unmute yourself, Kashmira.
Hi, everyone.
Well,
I hope I'm audible.
absolutely, absolutely. We can hear you loud and clear, Kashmira. Well, today's agenda is a very interesting one. It's talking about Kashmira's eventful journey from actually a little before London School of Economics, but culminating in what she's currently doing at the Reserve Bank of India. I'll take the liberty of quickly introducing Kashmira. You guys can see her profile on the screen. It makes for very interesting reading. Well, Kashmira completed her undergraduate in economics, but obviously economics was the love of her life. She went on to do a master's from the London School of Economics. I won't bore you with details, but she did a few stints working here, working in a few places. But currently, I think, and the most exciting thing that I find in her profile is that she followed up her interest in mathematics, which is something that she's always had, and she currently is utilizing that interest in a sense by working with the Reserve Bank of India. She's conducting research, with them, and I think in itself as a quant faculty, this excites me a lot more. Over to you, Kashmira. I'm gonna stop sharing so you can pull up whatever you have.
Yeah. All right. So, first of all, let me just start by saying how lucky we are and grateful to be conducting this seminar while there are so many thousands of people out there struggling to even meet the basic needs to survive. So, I guess just checking in on how lucky and how privileged we are. So, starting off by first of all extending my thanks and gratitude to Anand sir, who has been a lovely mentor to me. As of now, I can say that. And thanks to Mentors Capital to allow me to convey my thoughts and just share about my journey here to you all. I think I can say that I'm not just Kashmira based on who and what all I have done up until now, but based on all the brains that I have leveraged upon. So here I'm putting out myself for you to leverage upon. So I guess thanks to Mentor Capital for allowing us such a wonderful platform. And so when I was in my undergraduate, so I was one of the few CBSE students in a room crowded with IBHLs. And I didn't even know what IB back then was. This is back in 2016. So I was just terrified of what lay ahead of me. I came from a very small town and now in a big city called Mumbai. So I was just terrified. But had I stayed the same, I wouldn't be here interacting with you all today. So that brings me to my first point of today. First message that I want to put out is put yourself out there because if you won't, then someone else will be standing out there. And trust me, you do not only want to be a spectator, but of course, unless it's IPL match or something else like that. So I pursued my undergraduate, as Anand rightly said, as a BSc Economics and Finance student at a University of London international course, where my subjects material and my exams were conducted by the London School of Economics itself. So there was a professor who used to fly down twice a year to teach us statistics, not only the first years, but all the years. And I was in my first year. So I made sure that I attended each and every session that he conducted, not only for first years, but also for second years as well as third years, because I got that one single opportunity to ask him a question at the end. And after all these sessions, I did go up to the platform where he was teaching from and interacted with him a bit more. And he eventually ended up recommending me for my master's. And I was the first student from my college to ever get a recommendation from an LSE professor for her master's. Which brings me to the second point, second message that I have for you all today. Let them laugh. Never ever try to fit in. Because it's funny how these golden opportunities do not come as often as you might think they do. And so, even if you see a ray of light shining outside the window, you need to shatter the glass. You need to shatter the glass and stretch yourself out of the window and grab that opportunity so that you can have it all. And so it's, I mean, this is all about, grabbing the opportunities, but then sometimes you also have to create opportunities for yourself. So when I had to choose subjects for my third year study, I chose to study a particular subject known as further mathematics for economists. And there's nothing new in it, you would say, but the college didn't really offer that subject because there was no other student prior to me who even thought of taking that subject. So college didn't have any teacher. I took a calculated risk of trying to enroll in that subject and studying the subject by myself. And well, as it turns out, I was the world topper in that subject, which brings me to the third point, third message that I have for you all today. Do not seek excuse in comfort. Had I chosen to just stick to the subjects that were offered by the college, I think I wouldn't have even gotten into the masters that I did study after. So I think no matter where you are at present, it all you have to do is evaluate your choices and take calculated risks because as the saying goes, higher the risks, higher the returns. And I think this was one of the few things and one of the few decisions that I'm very proud to make because it definitely wasn't easy to go on beside choosing a subject that college didn't really offer. So, and I guess so. In my second year, I experienced a very deep personal loss, which left me shattered and which completely made me lose my belief in myself. I had my actuarial exams 15 days right after my life was weathered by a storm. And I chose to not give up at that point in time and put on a smile on my face, even while I was being ripped apart from within. And I think that exam I cleared with flying colors, and I was amongst the 18% students who managed to clear one of the toughest exams of actuarial science at that point. Which brings me to the fourth point for today, which is believe in yourself. No matter the circumstances, you need to get up every single day to fight the fight against doubt, to fight the fight against fear. For you will never know what you are capable of until you push yourself to the limitations with the courage that only you have gathered from the experiences and the hardships that you have faced throughout in your journey. And I guess let's I think this is one question that I would like to put forth, and I would like this to be interactive session. So just comment down in the section and tell me which one of these lines do you guys think is longer? I don't
Right.
know. I think
Let us know in the chat. I mean,
yeah. And Anasa, if you can, just let me know what all students do write. Can we read up some of the answers that we are coming?
yeah, sure.
We are getting.
Well,
Yeah.
so far, well, I have some people saying A, some people saying the lines are equal. A lot of people are saying lines are equal actually. Gurlal
Okay.
is A, very confident A.
Okay, I think that's good. So, we are often taught to believe that the lines are of equal length just because I'm asking you the question, which one of these lines is longer? And you think it's a tricky question, but it's not. It is just right all in your mindset. So I think that is one thing that you need to change and to not be fixated with preconceived notions that you might have about anything that you dare to do in your life. Just go out there, do not be afraid to fail, to not be afraid to be laughed at, because I think these experiences are what will make you into the person that you are today. And that is what has made me into the person that I am today. So I think these are the defining moments of your life when you might have to choose between doing a particular certain internship or doing a particular internship, which might be two different things. But sometimes you will have to make the decisions which might not seem right at the moment but might be beneficial for you in the longer term. So you have to not be short sighted and try to think about discounting factor that we do take into account while studying finance. So just simple as that, right? So that brings us to this point here, is this message that I have, have a fixed goal and be flexible about the plan. For many people, in my statement of purpose at the LSE, I had a line written, this is just a means for me. So that wasn't my end goal. Sometimes what helps is to take that game theory approach to work the solution in a backward manner. Think about how you see yourself 5 years down the line. I mean, you won't get a definite answer, but at least some sort of an idea about how you see yourself, and then just work backwards and and just optimize basically. So choose the path which will allow you to reach to that goal as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible and as happy as it will make you. So I think with that, let us try to explore some of the sample paths that you all might have as people who are studying economics at present. The very first, so there are, of course, you can choose to study economics at a master's level as well. But let us start off with how your options will look like if you are just an undergraduate, which I think most of you are today in the audience. So the very first thing that comes to mind is consulting. And I think after this, you have variety of options. You can go and pursue an MBA, or you can be in consulting as well. So consulting is, I would say, more about, I mean, you get perks of travel. You will have to, sometimes people do say that you have to work hard, and sometimes it might involve working in the night or till morning, but I think that would only be for a week in a year or so. So do not base your decisions just on what people might have experienced only once in a year. I mean, that does not account for all of the kind of experiences and all of the kind of shaping and structuring that they might have at a particular consulting jobs. So consulting jobs can be in variety of different companies. You can go for tech giants, you can go for public companies as well. You can go for commercial banks, you can go for private banks, and you can join consulting firms, and especially marketing. So if you are someone who really likes to analyze the market, if you are someone who would be very excited to see how can you optimize the profit for a company, then I think consulting would be right for you, because they'll give you case studies and all, and I think every time the challenge is different. Even the methods and the techniques that you might be using will be the same, but the challenge is different, and the assumptions and the kind of underlying nature in which you will be working will vary every project that you work on. So sometimes you can choose to work on the same projects with the same clients. Other times you can also choose to basically switch between the company if they might have that option for you. And also remember, variety of consulting companies will actually also give you an option, and they might also sometimes finance your future study. So that also you should take into account. The second thing, the second kind of option that you all can explore is government services. So for anyone who might be, remotely interested into this, you can choose to pursue IAS, IPS, IES, because it does not necessarily mean that if you have an undergrad in economics, you should go and choose a field which is specifically econ related. The skills that we learn are hard skills. These are transferable skills. You learn how to analyze things, you learn how to interpret things, and you learn how to make sense of the assumptions that you are making your conclusions based upon. So these are things that are, and these are the skills that will be helpful in not only the economic jobs, but also in government services. And you can be a policy maker, you can be a policy research analyst in the government services. So you can go for IAS, IPs. There are so many policy think tanks that government currently runs. So RBI being one of them, where I am working currently, CAFRIL. Then you have NITI Aayog and NCAAR and all of this other variety of options. I think you will also get private policy institutions which you can join. And third, I think this is not really new. So finance, I think we all might have a nice idea about finance because of course the money speaks for itself. But again, you can choose to have variety of roles in the financial sector as well. You can choose to be in the investment management, so where you're managing the wealth of people, or you can choose to be in a private hedge fund where you learn how to invest, and or else you can be into trading. You can be into algorithmic trading where you're allowing business people to make their decisions, or you can also go into actuarial sciences, which is something that I pursued during my undergrad as well. So actuarial sciences is something where you will manage the risks of company, and mostly it is insurance company. So you try to minimize the losses they might incur. And sometimes it's funny, I mean, we all study about normal distribution, which is the kind of the crux of, I would say, which was something that sort of led to financial crisis. So yeah, when things are really not normal, and things get exciting when you go to work and not, and they aren't normal as you study in your colleges. And this is very new, exciting field that is coming up, burgeoning these days, data science. So I think if you are someone who has that analytical knack, who loves to play around with numbers and who loves to influence decisions for other people and make life easier for them, data science is something that you might go for. And remember, data science is not only about numbers. There is a story behind every number, and you need to figure out why is it the way it is, because not every time the data that you will have will be all that you need to analyze. Sometimes you might have outliers and you need to figure those things out. So it is not as straightforward as you would think it is to just, basically code and work around with numbers. No, you have to use the skills that you have studied in your undergrad and use some of your intuition to make the right decisions and analyze the data that you have at hand. The next thing that you can do is become a content creator. So I think this is really up and all these days. You can go on Instagram and just make an account and start, just basically preaching people. You will see so many students following accounts where people post about exam stress and how they are coping up with it. So you can maybe do that specifically for economic students because they will be able to relate to you better. Or you can also go on and start speaking about the content which you study in your undergraduate. So maybe you take up statistics, maybe you can take up economics, and just go on and make a YouTube channel, and well, you'll be out there having something of your own. And the very last option that we have here, oops, and the very last option that we have here is about research. So I think not much to say about this because I'll be talking about this in my next. So again, so even before I go to the research after masters or after PhD, I think some people have this idea that you cannot go into research if you're just undergraduate. That is not true. There are so many policy think tanks like Takshashila and so many other government policy think tanks that I have spoken about before who will take up you as an undergraduate. So not only government, but also private like JPAL and Pratham. You can work for these development organizations like the World Bank, Asian Bank, and IMF as well. So they do have nice scholarships available for interns that they take in right after undergrad who also want to just take a break and figure out and go on for masters the next year. So you might want to explore that option because that might in a way certain, put you in a certain position where you can just try and test whether research is something that you want. Because as people quite often say, graduate or PhD studies in economics, you should never ever do that if you will never regret in life that you never did that. And I think you should definitely not go for a graduate or a PhD if you do not know what else to do. So the opportunity cost is really, really high, at least in economics, because the kind of master's degrees that we get, so most often there are not many master's degree in economics, at least in US. And more so often you will get it in the UK and LSE. That is why it comes very closer in the ranking, maybe in the top 5 in terms of the masters that they offer. And you have various other colleges with various other kind of experiences and specializations that they offer. These days, you get degrees in not only pure economics, but in economics and mathematics, econometrics, which I pursued, or economics and data science. I think there's the one at Duke, which is about economics and data science. They were one of the few universities which started off that program really early. Okay, so now options after you graduate or PhD. So you can again go back to the consulting firm which you are working for, or just to go in a new firm and experience that culture. And the only difference will be that, let's say after undergrad you were working as an analyst, now you will be working as a senior analyst. And I think consulting is a really nice job if you are looking for something with a steady income, because in India at least you will not find jobs which will say economic consulting in their name, but you will find jobs with strategic consulting and management consulting. So in India, HR people, as of now, they do not really know what kind of economic students can bring to the consulting firms at a higher position. So I think you sort of need to project yourself in a manner. So people who are working at projects do know what way economic students bring to the table, but maybe not the HR people. So you need to sort of pass your way through them. Once you enter, I think then there is nothing else that can limit your potential and the career growth that you can also possibly have. So again, you can choose to go into finance. And now, after a graduate degree in finance, sometimes you do need a specific graduate degree in, let's say, financial engineering or finance and risk management, or let's say even masters in actuarial science, to be able to get to a position in a firm at a higher, at a senior level, where you are not only analyzing the data but sort of making the decisions. So you do not only want to stay in a company and just be analyzing data throughout your life, right? You do want to progress up in the hierarchy. So sometimes that might require you to have a certain degree and a certain graduate level education in finance, because in finance field things get technical once you surpass a certain hierarchy level. So you can go into investment management, fintech, and work for companies like Paytm, ICICI Bank, and manage the wealth of people. You can also go and work with private equity and hedge funds, and investment banking is a lucrative option that people do have these days. And yeah, it comes with its pros and cons, and you all might have heard the number of work hours you have to put in. So I think if you find you are someone who is married to your work, you can choose investment banking as well. But again, I think it depends on you as a person, how you balance your work and life. So it varies from person to person, and does not necessarily mean that if a certain person whom you are speaking to right now is finding it difficult, you will also find it difficult, and vice versa as well. So you need to evaluate your interests and your skill set, and think of how you want to grow as a person, and which sort of area you would like to work in. And then you get specific degrees in risk management, and this will open a wide variety of options like actuarial science. You can go into insurance sectors where all they care about is risk. So I think if you are someone who really likes to take risks in their lives, kidding, not necessarily you need to take risks in your life to go on and do a job which involves you to manage the risk of other people. But again, you need to have that certain knack, because people look for, I mean, let's say if you even pass through the initial stages of the application process, and when you will be at the interview stage, people want to check how do you make the decisions that you make, because I think with risk management that involves a lot of stake. And the next thing I think, which is what lured me for my master's, was that I wanted to get into academia and research. So you can either be a professor at a university and simultaneously pursue research, or you can also just be a researcher at a particular think tank or a policy policy, or you can even do research actually in consulting companies. So companies do conduct research. So let's say, for example, we have food chains like Zomato and Swiggy, and they just want to see if it makes sense to put up one more delivery boy in this particular area. So what are the costs and what are the benefits? So you might have to work on an optimization problem over there and figure out how stuff is going to pan out and what sort of decisions you might make. Sometimes it might involve you to analyze. So this I'm talking about for companies and the kind of research that you see in companies. And if you are someone who really likes to work in academics, give me a minute. So if you're someone who really likes to work into academia and who is really into, why the things are happening the way they are, if negative interests really inspire you, and if you are just wondering about why does economics only talk about things being in equilibrium always, like why does demand have to match supply? Because you all know that in real life that does not happen always. So if you are someone who would also want to go into theoretical research, there are so many options in economics you get these days. So you can go into micro, you can choose to do macro research, you can go into behavioral economics, which is a nice blend of, I would say, psychology and economics. So I think there was some person who actually said that, psychology and economics are two sisters who got divided during their birth. So this is, I don't know. So I think there is so much that you can explore these days. And I think studying economics changes you as a person. It not only provides you with hard skills, which you can find helpful in these jobs, but it also sort of changes the way you look at the decisions that you make in your life as well. So I think that is something that economics can teach you. I mean, it's all about, choosing to do the best in terms of scarcity, which is everywhere. So yeah, the next thing that I want to talk about is research again here. So I think I've already spoken a bit about this. So I think let me just dive right into what we have next. So again, once we know all the possible options that we have, you also need to know how do you approach these people? How do you make sure that you are not only using the one way street that everyone else is crowded on, to achieve the end goal, because that will take certain time. So there are some sort of back channels that you can use sometimes. So one of which is active networking. And when you see LinkedIn here, I think every one of you, I think I got so many requests. So once Anand sir put my profile up there on the Mentors Capital, but there were few only. There were only, I guess, there was only one student who actually messaged me and sent me a note as well along. So I think that's a very nice way to connect with people and personalize it. So if after this session, you can put up a post and tag me and Anand sir and Mentors Capital and talk about how you learned and how this seminar might have helped you to make decisions better in your life. Or you can also send us the connection request and send a personalized note, because I might not remember 10 years down the line that, okay, I I sort of was lecturing in a seminar that you attended. But if I go back to the messages, I can see, oh yeah, this person actually messaged me after my seminar. And so that I will really be reminded, of this person being trying to actively connect to me and not only just, basically trying to seek out general advice. So I think if you get personalized advice, that is really best. And one way to do that is active networking. People talk about networking all the time. That is not what will work every single time. The other thing is about local events. So local events not only talk about the events that happen offline, but online as well, similar to the one that we are having right now. So local events, so I remember during my undergraduate, there were these banks in Mumbai which used to have their annual general lectures. And I think it was some export import banks lecture that I attended once. And I just saw that a professor from Harvard was coming down to speak. And I remember asking other of my classmates as well that if you want to come and see, they were like, oh, we are never going to understand anything, because she was going to present her PhD paper. And I had I was just fine with not understanding anything, but all I wanted was to grab that opportunity to speak to her after the session, because just to see why she made the decisions that she have made in her life. And I was very confused about going for a master's or not at that point. So I think in a way she really helped me. And then I think some years down the line she turned out to be the chief economist at IMF, currently Geeta Gopinath. So I think you never know who you might meet. So she was just a Harvard, not just, but she was a Harvard professor back then. And yeah, so I think you never know who you might just meet in accident. And never ever forget to take people's business cards. I have her business card right now. So also you can also then search for jobs on portals online. So there are these various websites which might list job openings specifically for economics, but you also get LinkedIn jobs. So you don't nearly have to subscribe to the premium version to access to it. So I would suggest before you even apply for the job, just speak to a couple of people. So you have this nice option of searching on LinkedIn, just the company name, and you will find all the people who are working at that particular company. So you can just drop them a message and say that this is what I'm looking for. And I would like to talk to you about a role that I'm interested in working at the same company that you are working at right now, or you might have worked before for. So that will give you a really nice insight as to what to expect when you go and join a particular company. Because sometimes you might have heard something, and you might just be biased about a particular company or a particular job role. So just make sure that you also evaluate and talk to as many people as you can. I mean, you should always try to increase the sample that you base your decisions on. We never approximate to normal until and unless we have enough samples. So you never make your decisions until you speak to certain number of people and certain people who will guide you in a right way, because there might be people out there who might not be suitable to guide because of their own reasons. But again, you just need to evaluate and verify for yourself which things will work and which things will not for you as a person. And the very underrated resource is your professors. You take them for granted and you never try to utilize the connections that they might have. Just by getting access to one professor, you get access to all the network that he is into. And he might have friends who studied with him during his college. So you get access to a large pool of networks. So just one talk with your professor about what you're looking for this summer, you might be placed somewhere else. So that happened with me during my undergraduate. I got to work as a research assistant for a professor in IGIDR as well as in University of Mumbai. And that was in my first year. So I didn't know, I didn't even know how to work in Excel back then. But I just took that opportunity and I learned it along the way, because sometimes you have nothing to lose and you just need to put yourself out there and be afraid to fail, but be confident enough in your potential and that you can learn things on the job. So I think if you have that, if you have the grit and if you have the focus, then all the opportunities that might come your way will only serve for your benefit. The second last thing we have here is friends and seniors. So I think sometimes you might have a good set of friends who will actually, uplift each other and try to have a pool of, let's say you just have a WhatsApp group and some person just got a job, you can just ask them if you can get a reference for a particular job or not. So it was one of my seniors who kind of actually asked me if I was looking for a job, and I ended up replying a yes, and that is how I got into Cafrel. So she was already working at Cafrel previously. And I think sometimes you never know. So what will happen? So just be open to opportunities and not shy away from by just thinking that, oh, maybe this is not for me. Because how will you ever know if you've never tried out for yourself? And the last thing that we have here is extensive research. So I think this is ingrained into each and every student that studies economics, I would say. So you never really do away with research. So I think even before you access to all of these people, I think you should do a research on yourself, because maybe in a classroom there is no stupid question, but in real life there do exist stupid questions, and people will judge you on the basis of the questions you ask them. So do your research before you approach people so that you can ask the right questions and get the answers that will actually help you, and not just look for general advice, I would say. So I guess that's all from my side for today. Thank you and stay safe. And I guess the floor is open for questions now. I hope I didn't take much time.
Oh, wonderful. I think this is a very insightful, exciting session by Kashmira. I certainly hope the audience enjoyed the session. I think the idea from our end was to give you a flavor of what Kashmira's journey was like, obstacles that she faced, how she got over some of these insecurities, thoughts, concerns, and some of the challenges that you face when you're applying to an Ivy League school like the London School of Economics. And I think you've done a commendable job. I particularly like that point about believe in yourself. I think don't worry if people laugh, because I mean sometimes only you know exactly what is running through your mind. That
और
confidence.
कोई बात
Right. Okay. So we
अपने
would
कुत्ते
like to
कहाँ चले
open
गए सब
this up for questions. I'm sorry. I think I can hear somebody
जल्दी
talking. Can we do this one at a time, guys? Just so it's easier to manage. Could you raise your hand or send me a message on chat, and then
क्यों
and then maybe you could unmute yourself. Right. We have a question from Miss Anna. Anna says, could you tell us about the scope of behavioral economics?
Okay, so starting off with the very first idea that generally students have is that you need to have a degree in behavioral economics to get into a job which will involve you to do a particular thing related to it. That is not really true. If you have economic skills, I think the theory part of it you can always learn on the job. So you get firms so you can also go into consulting firms and do something related to behavioral economics. So let's say if you go into marketing consulting firm, there you will have to analyze the psychology of the customers that they serve to and help them make the decisions. So even that might involve a bit of behavioral economics. But again, these days, I think the field is really, really just burgeoning out, and many of the people are widening their interests. And you can also go into research. I think research in behavioral econ is something that is very underrated. So if you haven't already, I would suggest for you to read the book Think and Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. This is like one of the best friendships that I have ever seen. And I think Daniel Kahneman was also the Nobel Prize winner. And I would suggest for you to read some work of Nassim Nicholas Taleb as well, who was one of the authors of The Black Swan. So I think that will sort of give you some idea as to how behavioral thinking works. And you can basically work at a hedge fund as well, because over there you have to make instinctive decisions which will and which will involve analysis of the market behavior. So I think it does not only mean that if you want to go into behavior, or if you are interested into behavior of human psychology, you should only stick to jobs which have in the title behavioral economics, because you never know what you else might enjoy as well. And I think it was this is just something that I'm recollecting right now. Many people don't really know. So there is a very nice connection between physics and economics. There actually also exists a field called econophysics, and it was Newton who actually said that it is easier for him to analyze the motion of heavenly bodies than figure out the human behavior, because he lost a lot of money in the South Sea bubble back then. And I think in economics and physics there are so many similarities, but the only thing that is changing is that in physics, the laws of nature remain constant. But in economics, we analyze human behavior, which is constantly changing. And we change how we believe, we change how we talk to people, we change how we react based on our past experiences, which keeps on evolving as and when the time progresses. So I think behavioral economics is certainly something that is not really, not inherent already into economics.
Oh,
And
that's an interesting answer, Kashmira. In fact, I mean, the moment we start talking about behavioral economics, what I'm thinking is
yeah,
pandemic raging for the last couple of years, people and psychology going off the hooks completely. So I
yeah,
think behavioral, psychologists and economists must be having a field day of research in the last couple of years, and at least trying to make sense
yeah.
of people and their reactions.
And I think this will just help you in making decisions. Sometimes you just have to see how people react to a particular product. So sometimes if you offer them a particular, so you get this marketing strategies that you might use. So that also involves behavioral science. There are various studies that are being conducted, which marketing people do use
Absolutely, a lot of
in action.
marketing
So I
is
think,
about
yeah,
it's about predicting and
yeah,
at least trying to influence behavior and saying that, hey, if I can put this
yeah. And I
as an
think
offer, expect the user to do this, right? And that's uh,
exactly.
absolutely beautiful. Kashmira, I have a request from some students here saying, "Ma'am, you've been mentioning a lot of these books that people should read. Could you type the name out or the title out in the chat for everybody to see? Because that way,
Yeah,
I think the audio wasn't
sure.
clear. Maybe people don't understand the title.
I think
Uh,
I mentioned. So just read the works of people, Nassim Taleb,
all right.
Black Swan.
Just to do that, I'm going
I'm
to.
just gonna put it in short, I think. Oh, it should be Taleb.
Okay.
Sorry. And I guess thinking fast and slow.
Right. I think this is
Yeah. So these are like two books that you might start off your journey with.
right. Black Swan and
And also like just for anyone who is interested in, I guess maybe data, you might wanna refer Outliers by
yep, absolutely. Could you just send it to
Malcolm.
everybody instead of just me, Christina?
Oh, sorry.
Outliers by Glass.
Yeah, let me just
Yeah, that's also.
yeah, let me just do that.
All right. I think I have a few other questions coming in from.
Yeah.
So here's a question by Yogesh. Yogesh says, "Oops, wait." Yogesh says that, well, I am a BSc statistics student, and I want to join IGIDR Mumbai, which you said that you've done some research for.
Yeah.
So he's saying, is that something that is easy to do? Is that going to be hard? Do you have any ideas on their requirements?
Okay, so I think if you want to go for a master's in economics, is that what he means?
Yes, means an MSc in economics from.
MSc in economics. Okay, yeah. So I think they do have an entrance test, if I'm not wrong. And I think once you clear that, I'm not quite sure what else do you have because I never really considered a master's at IGIDR. But I think you can just go up to their website and check up the requirements that they have. But one thing I would say, I think the environment at IGIDR is really good. I think once you enter the environment, you have vast greenery and everything. And the professors over there are really the sweetest professors. So I remember I went for the internship and I have this habit of like if I see a bookshelf in a room, I will just scan through, all the books that they might have. And it was in a bookshelf of a professor at IGIDR. I saw and first heard about Nicholas Nassim Taleb. So that is how I was introduced to him actually.
Okay.
And I think at IGIDR, so I think specifically they are much more into macroeconomic research, I would say, and they also get students from abroad actually studying in IGIDR.
Mhm.
So it is definitely one of the best options that you can explore. And certainly your BSc in statistics would put you at a higher level because at a graduate level in economics, it is more of the statistics that you want to use. And economic theory classes you can certainly take and develop the economic sense of data.
Mhm.
And that is something that you can always develop at a graduate level. In fact, many graduate economics students come from a mathematics background, and people actually do want to take those because it will involve solving proofs, and it will actually involve a whole lot of real analysis, which mathematics and statistics students might be more comfortable with.
I guess it
I
also
think,
depends on how much research work is part of it as well, because a lot of research.
yeah. So yeah, you can also actually you will have an option to write a thesis, and yeah, you can choose to write a thesis as well.
Okay, interesting that you mentioned thesis because the next question I have is from Ashwarya. Aishwarya asks me about academia. She's saying that is it better to do a PhD standalone, or should one think of doing PhD along with or after a teaching role, right? And so
Okay.
her question is about which is more efficient in a sense.
Yeah.
Not sure that she's asking about efficacy. And
Yeah.
the second follow-up question is how long does it take, right? With or without, a teaching
Yeah.
role.
So I would to answer the easier question first. I think PhD often takes you or somewhere around 5 to 6 years. So that's a very long investment. But again, you can choose to drop out in between as well. So some US universities will offer you a master's degree if you drop out in between of the PhD, and some universities like LSE will want you to do a MRes degree first, which is a master's in research, first for 2 years and then progress to PhD. Or sometimes you can also directly choose to enroll in a PhD if you're damn sure about your research interests and everything else. So that is one thing to answer. And the second one about teaching and research simultaneously, so basically teaching and PhD simultaneously, that is what you will find at most of the universities, at least in economics. So economics, if you're doing a PhD in economics, you will be conducting research. You will have to take undergrad level classes. Most of the time you will be assistant professors or a research fellow or a teaching fellow at a university where you are doing your PhD. Because during my time at the LSE, I had like a set of lecture first initially, and then there was a PhD student who used to take our classes and we used to discuss problem sets. So you will be one of those teachers who will be, taking a class after the lecturer has, taught the topic
So
in
like
depth. So
teaching
I
a
think
student of sorts.
so if you haven't taught previously to enrolling your PhD, you will be teaching during your PhD for sure. So that is one of the requirements, and that is how you will be reimbursed with a stipend as well, because PhD will be sponsored
Correct.
most of the times in US. So that is how you will also get a reimbursement. And I think that is one of the best options if you're looking for a PhD in economics, I would say. And about teaching before PhD, I would say, so I think, so I have taught for a while now. It's been like 10 months or something for me to teach. So I think the one thing that I have learned is that it just allows me to think beyond what I might have thought about a particular topic. Because when you're teaching it to someone else, you're not only engaging in passive learning, you're engaged in active learning, and you get to answer the doubts that your students will ask you. So many of the students, before they go for a PhD, I think it does not necessarily mean that after PhD you have to be a teacher, because if you are someone who is not comfortable with standing up on a stage and people looking at them, then you can choose to do research as well. And in that sense, you won't necessarily have to have a teaching experience before your PhD. So I think it just depends on how you want to see yourself as.
Right.
I hope that answers your question.
I think so too. I think so. It does.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have a very open-ended question about how you got into London School of Economics, but I think the last half an hour, more or less, focusing on what you did to get you, whether it was getting into LSE, whether it was those research papers that you wrote,
Yeah.
or those recommendations that you got. But
So like,
I think I'm going to repackage that question and ask you, if you were to say that there's one thing that really tipped the scales in your favor, your LSE application,
okay.
what's the one thing that you think stood out in your LSE application?
Yeah.
Right?
I think, yeah. So I think it was downright my academics. And just to answer the open-ended question, I got into LSE by applying there, because if you only think about getting into LSE and if you do not act upon the action, you will never get there. So the very first thing is to just apply and talk to people. So I made sure I understand the behavior and the parameters that these admission committee people make decisions upon by messaging. I don't know, I guess I messaged around 20 to 25 people who had done the degree prior to on LinkedIn, and send them a set of 10 questions. And at the end, I would also always mention that if you have time, please do consider helping me out and all that sort of stuff. So I think so many of them did, and I think that was really helpful. And the one thing that stood out the most in my application, I would say, might be my SOP and one of the persons who recommended me, because he was a professor at the LSE itself. And he didn't really taught me. So I think in the committee might have wondered how did she got her recommendation and stuff. So I think you just have to put yourself out there.
Yeah. I think the most impactful thing that you say, and I think I'm going to second that thought by giving you a little bit of data, and I encourage every one of the students listening in to try this. Right, go to any university that you're looking to apply for and check out their admission statistics. Right, I think a very good way of figuring out. Right, we think that the Harvards of the world, MITs of the world are very hard to get in. Right, test point. Right, go check out how many people applied to a Harvard last year, and you'd be surprised to see. You'd think
Yeah.
initially that, hey, well, there's CAT exam in India, there are lakhs of
Yeah.
people who write the CAT. I mean, Harvard should have lakhs of applications, right? You'd be surprised, it'll probably have 10, 20, 30,000 people applying, right? Depending on which university, right? So I think the first point that Kashmira makes is that you actually need to apply in the first,
Yeah.
because you have to be one amongst those 30,000 people who believe there is value in applying and that you deserve it. And lo and behold, sometimes that very fact of applying, the moment you make that choice that I want to apply, the rest of it sort of falls into place, right? So very powerful message that from Kashmira indeed. There is a question that Sriram is asking me. It's in fact, I think he's asking in general, but let me give my 2 cents on it before. His question is, how do we choose universities? When we are trying to
Mhm.
shortlist, which
Yeah.
schools to apply to. How should we choose them? Should we rank? Should we consider university rankings that are published online, or should we look at individually the faculty and the strength of the faculty, their background, and their the kind of placements that happen? Well, I think it should be a mix of information that is already published. To be
Yeah.
honest, a lot of these rankings tend to be very, very erratic. One ranking might
Yeah.
give a university a particular one methodology, might give you a particular rank, another one might not. So take these with a pinch of salt. Sure, I think it's a very big indicator. If 3 or 4 ranking methodologies give a particular university a rank, then it's more likely to be in that range. But I still think that what Kashmira said in terms of, hey, speak to people who've gone there, speak to people who've experienced the university and the life therein. And I think that's the better indicator than a pure ranking, right? Just to say that I studied in, rank 1 or rank 2 university, I don't think it gives you that confidence. But if you speak to somebody and they say that, you know what, I went from Delhi University, I went from Mumbai University to this college, and I was able to cope up, and I got a rank pretty high in my course there, and I think that can fill you with a lot more confidence, right? Uh, Kashmira, maybe you want to add to that?
Yeah, actually, so with rankings as well, I think you would get different sets of ranking. One would be the overall college ranking, and second is a department ranking. So you can actually go on and check the research output of the professors at a particular university, and that will be the basis of the ranking sometimes. But again, I think the way I made my decision was, I think, how easier it is for me to apply, and how do I see myself get in there, because I think even applying comes at a cost. There's a certain fee that you have to pay for application as well, and not everyone can afford that, so you might have to optimize that decision as well. So if you are doing that, just talk to many people, as Anand has said. And the thing that is most underrated is you just need to check the expectations of yourself after that degree. Do not make a straight away decision of what kind of masters do I want. Evaluate further you with your options of what you see yourself doing after a particular degree, and then just work backwards with what is it that is going to get you closer to that. And I think that will be the college that you want to look for. So you can go on and check placements if you are interested into how well a particular college can place you. Then you would certainly go on and check how do they have placed in the past. But again, do not be biased, because I think what is always on the hall of the fame is the students who might sometimes be exceptional as well. So you do not want to let that bias kick in the kind of decisions that you make. And also, do talk to professors. It is very common that students do email the professors before they enroll, but just make sure that that professor and the admission committee, you do want to make that sure that some sort of a relationship there is. I mean, you can have a relationship and you can exploit that, and you can choose to talk to someone who does not have a specific relationship, because then that might in a way affect your admission as well sometimes.
Right. I think that was a very detailed answer, Kashmira. But Shriram, if I was to leave you with one thought, I think it's not so simple. I think it's like a matrix. It has multiple parameters that you should consider when you're choosing colleges. Some of which are on the basis of rankings, others which are based on what your goals and your aspirations are, and others still that depend on the information that is published on the university's website. Right. So I think it's a mix of all of this that helps you shortlist. Uh, all right. Next question is from Ms. Smita. Her question is that I'd like to volunteer for research on welfare economics. Could you recommend any good organizations to do so? And I think this is a process of exploration for me, is what she said.
Yeah. So I think with welfare economics, you can always choose to work with United Nations Development. I mean, that is what comes to my mind first, because they do a lot of research and they actually hire a lot of interns who do research welfare economics. So you can choose to go for actually development banks as well, because even though it has the name development, and it does involve a lot of welfare work. So I think you can also go for Takshashila Institution, which is a bit about policy research, where they might also be touching up upon welfare issues. So I think it's just a matter of you speaking to people and getting to know what kind of research is happening at a particular place. So you might also sometimes be interested in welfare of, let's say, agricultural community. Then you can have, agricultural economic research as well. NCAR, I think, is one of the institutions that do hire a lot of people.
Okay.
So I think, yeah. But again, I wouldn't say that all of these are volunteering work. You might be getting paid a stipend. I think, yeah. I think that's just fine. Yeah.
But fair enough. I think those are interesting leads. I think what you're trying to say is that there are
Yeah.
many quasi-governmental bodies that might be conducting research on the ground, field research into welfare
Yeah.
policies, whether it's in urban areas or rural areas. So try your hand at those kind of
Yeah,
organizations.
and I think JPAL, I would like to again say, JPAL is again one of the best ones which is working. I mean, they have a poverty action lab, and
Okay.
I think, yeah,
Okay. Interesting.
the Banerjee and Duflo pair is just rocking these days, I'd say.
Nice.
Yeah, so
Interesting. I hope that answers your question. Next query is from Isha. Isha says, well, I think it's a very interesting question. Given that, this pandemic has gripped us for the last year or so, and online learning has become the future, everybody and everything is being learned online. So Isha is asking you to compare, something that you learn from an edX or a Coursera versus, a degree from a LSE or a Harvard. I know it's an unfair question, but how would how would these two compare with each other if somebody is
It would,
in college
yeah,
right now and wants to, sort of compare them, right? Get a
yeah.
perspective.
I think just the flexible nature of an online course, because you do not have to pay every time, and you do not have your grades based on a particular course that you enroll in online. So
Yeah.
I think that is something that I really like, because I'm not a big fan of tests and all. I really like to just deep dive into the subject and study it at my pace, not by, okay, I have an exam at the end of the week. So that might happen with any course that you might enroll at any university. So I think that is something that I cherish from the online courses that I did. And I think the learning should happen simultaneously. You shouldn't see these as two exhaustive options. You should see this as, happening simultaneously. So you might not be satisfied with what is being offered to you in your undergraduate or at your master's level. So you might just go on and check the MIT Open Courseware, let's say, for example, and see what other professors and how it is the way they are teaching the same particular topic, because you get to see different points, and that is how you will understand a particular topic. I think for me, it has always been that sort of a thing. I'm not very good at memory, but that is why I need to build a story around any particular concept that I'm studying. So I always have to go and look up for people who have developed this particular topic and see what led them to develop this. So I think that is sometimes explained in a course. So you can, if you're interested in history, you can go to edX and Coursera and just have the free courses. And sometimes it doesn't really hurt if you also get to the extent of getting a certificate. So always remember, Coursera and these websites also have scholarship option available, and you will just have to fill out a
Yeah.
simple form and a SOP sort of a thing. And it is not really hard to get a scholarship. So I think if you just convince them once, you can also get a scholarship and get a certificate, which will be added to your resume, I guess. So, and so that you can not only talk in interview about a particular course that you might have taken, but you can actually show that yes, you are interested enough in a particular topic.
Okay, interesting. Well, I think here's a question I have from Anisha. Anisha says, well, Anisha is asking a very pertinent question. She's saying, when you decided to apply to a university, when you're applying for programs abroad, how important is it to consider consultants, right? People who help you with your essays and SOPs,
Okay.
or
Hmm.
maybe your visa. So
Yeah.
does that help? When is that an absolute must or not? I think that's a question that she's asking. If I can quickly sort of put in a word before you, Kashmira, because I know your approach. I'm sure you want to tell them about what you did and what your
Yeah.
perspective is. But I think my answer would be I wish there was a one answer for every student who's attending this
Yeah.
session.
Exactly.
I think you need to find your own way. I guess it depends on how much you know, or how much you're sure of, and how much you need advice about. So if you are absolutely sure about your career goal, if you're absolutely sure about how this particular course from this particular college will help you achieve your long-term goals, then I don't think a consultant is going to add a great amount of value, right? But if you need somebody to sort of talk things over, and you need somebody to sort of structure your thought process into a nicely worded essay, sometimes consultants can actually be very, very useful. And I've experienced that first time, because sometimes when I have discussions with students, then we find that at the end of half an hour, 45 minutes, the perspective at the end of it is very different from the perspective that you begin with, right? So there is value, but I guess it depends and varies from person to person.
I think I have almost nothing to add to what he has answered.
Okay. But maybe you could tell them about what you did. I mean, did you really
Okay.
find out
Yeah. So I did everything by myself actually, and I didn't have a president as well, because none of the students in my college actually previously applied to the degree that I even got in. So I think I had no precedent. But again, I think one sort of a consultant, I would say, not exactly a consultant, but one sort of a mentor I had, who was my recommender, was from LSE itself. So I think I took my GRE exam and I didn't really score good in the verbal part of it. So I just messaged him quickly asking whether that was enough or not. So I think that answer really helped me a lot. And I didn't take my GRE again. And I did get into the degree as well. So I think sometimes you need to see, because these kind of things can be, the breaking point and the difference between you entering in the process of even being evaluated by the admission committee. So sometimes these kind of decisions, if you have some insider information, it will help you a lot, and it might put you in a certain privileged position than others. But again, if you are very sure about yourself, you can do it by yourself as well. I think there's really no harm in learning how to do stuff. And I think at the internet, I mean, at the internet at our disposal, we have everything that we need available
Absolutely. In fact,
online.
that was the way even I would suggest all of you guys to think about it. Right? There's this big network of mentors we have on our platform. I think my first entreaty to you would be, if you have any doubts, any questions about the application process, reach out to somebody who's gone there and ask them directly. Right? I think that should clarify whether you need help or not. Right? Speak to somebody who's gone through the process. Whether I think our network of mentors will make it easier for you, but even within your circles, just like Kashmira did so, you could find mentors, you could find seniors who walk the path that you'd like to. And I think that's a good starting point. If obviously that tells you that you need a consultant, you need a little more of a detailed discussion, do reach out to us. Our mentor assist program can obviously solve all your issues.
Yeah.
All right, I have a next question from Gurlal. Gurlal is saying, well, I think it's kind of a generic question. He's saying, well, profile and academics are very, very important for a good university, right? They need you to have good academics as well as have done a variety of things, played a variety of roles, internships, job experience, etc. But he's saying, how good do you need to be at academics in order to be considered, right? So, is there a threshold? What would that threshold?
Um, Yeah, so sometimes actually universities do specifically mention certain requirements that they have. Sometimes it might be the GPA grade that you might even need, and sometimes it might be the subjects that you should have already studied to enroll in their program. And that is, I think, just for them to see that you will fare well and you will be able to handle the pressure. So I think that is something that you should always stick to. And if you already have an aim, then you can always go on the website and check it for specific colleges. So for US, it might be different. For UK, it might be different. And for Indian colleges, you might have to take a certain entrance exam specific to the economics and mathematics and statistics or logical reasoning and all this, I think.
But I'm going to take a researcher's answer to that. I'm going to say that I wish there was again an easy answer, because universities don't, even universities in Europe, they don't release statistics on what was the average GPA of a student.
Oh, yeah. So you will only know the benchmark that you need to cross to even make an entry, but you won't. So, because I think that really varies a lot, because it not only depends on how you perform as a person, but also what your cohort who has applied to a particular university, because they're not comparing you as a person, they're comparing you with someone else who could they have taken instead of you. So, I think it also matters how other people have fared well. And I think so, it isn't necessarily the thing that you have scored or you have achieved, which matters when you apply.
Wonderful. And I think I'd agree. I think, Gurlal, if I want to leave
Yeah.
you with one thought, it's going to be, don't worry about one parameter, right? I think if you're applying to, let's say, London School of Economics, I'd say think to keep
Yeah.
your academic score, even if it's CGPA,
Yeah.
convert it into a percentage. Anything around 80%, 80% plus, I think is a good qualifying score, right? I think the
Yeah.
university will
And
consider you seriously,
yeah,
but
always, and like it will never hurt the higher the number you have in
absolutely.
academics. It will never hurt. So I
Absolutely. And
think, yeah.
90%, it's even better. But a bare qualifying should be, any university under the sun
Yeah.
should be around 80, 85%. And beyond that, I think what you should do, and this is something that applies for any course, is to think, what is it on my profile that really stands out? Because I think Kashmira's point is again that it depends on the cohort that you're applying with. 10,000, 15,000 people applying. Have I done something that only 10 of them or 15 of them or 20 of them have done? Right? If I have something like that on my CV, on my application, I think that really furthers my chance. So look at, you don't have to say that the academic profile has to be always stupendous, but you need to have
Yeah.
something in your profile that really stands out for sure.
I mean, sometimes you get these exceptional students who are really not good at taking the tests, but they have a very highly speaking of LOR from professor who might be very influential. So yeah, even though you don't have great academics, they will get into Princeton. I mean, John Nash was one of them. So yeah.
Absolutely, John Nash is one of them who's incredible in terms of theorizing.
Yeah. I think his
But
LOR just consisted of one line. He's a mathematical genius. I think it was something just one line LOR and he got in.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I have a question that's directed pointedly at me. Isha's asking me, well, what made you choose IIM Bangalore, and how has your experience been at uh,
Yeah.
studying there? Well, and to be honest, the choice was made for me. Back in the days when I wrote the CAT, got a good percentile. I think 99.88. I think it's a dream, right? When you write the test, you don't think I'm going to score 99.88, right? Well, so I was on, seventh heaven, if you ask me. I had all calls from all IIMs. I really worked hard at preparing for the interviews because I was a fresher, which means that I really had to shape up my thought process on why straight after engineering I want to do an MBA. So yeah, I put in my hours there. When the time came to choose, I guess I was only choosing between Bangalore, I think it was Calcutta and Kozhikode, and I think it was an easy choice for me in a sense because well, I've always loved Bangalore. I am a South Indian. I belong to this side of the country, and B, I think Bangalore weather-wise and even in terms of the rankings, I think it was an easy choice for me to choose Bangalore over any of the other colleges that I applied to. Right. Well, as far as experience goes, I think that's a different ball game altogether because when you join, and I think this is true even for a London School of Economics or any other top university or college, is that when you get in, well, you think that you really had a big achievement. I walked in thinking, well, I was my school topper. I'd done very well in college. I was very confident about how my I would stand out. But once you get to a school like IIM Bangalore, you find that everybody's a topper. In fact, in a sense, the first week is a moment of insecurity because you're thinking, well, there are geniuses much beyond me here. So will I be able to stand up? Will I be able to make my own place in this in such exalted company? Well, I think insecurity stays for as long, right? The other thing with studying in a college is that it's a college, there's hostel, there's so many interactions you have with your peers, you make friends. Well, I think 2 years flew by, and I think I had a fabulous experience there, made some great friends, and yeah, I think that sort of sums up my experience. I think I really became a more confident, evolved person at the end of my 2 years at Bangalore. Not just learning in the classroom, but also learning from my friends and peers and their experiences. All right. Okay, we have a couple of other questions coming in. Okay, this is about what impact do internships play when I'm applying to a program at LSE? Internships.
I think I would just say one thing, internships would actually lead you to the decision to apply to a university because that is what will define your interests.
Okay.
Because until and unless you try out on these internships, you will never know what you are actually interested in. Because often we will see the things that we study in a classroom are very different than what involves when you are on the ground working. So I think that is the role that very foremost will be played by a particular internship. And the second is, yes, they do hold a lot of importance because that will show that you are actively trying to get experience and see whether you really enjoy this particular topic or this particular subject or not. And it will just show your dedication and how passionate you are into actually, so I think when we're talking about internships, you should not only think of internships as something that happens at the end of the year. You can also sometimes do internship throughout the year. So I happened to do 3 internships during my first year of my undergrad, and that was mostly because I think first reason is sometimes my college didn't really had so much of assignments every single week that we had to hand. It was only one exam at the end of the year, so I had the liberty to sort of slack a bit during the months of till December, I would say, and then just study it because the exams were in May. So sometimes you just need to make that choice, and more internships you do, the more kind of experience you will gain, I would say, and that is all the internships are for. And everyone knows that. Even the people who will admit you in a particular university will know what kind of an internship you would have learned, what sort of a thing. So I think, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Great. I think Shivangi, if I was to add, I'd say I'm completely in concurrence with what Shivangi is saying. I think your approach should be internship. Teach me more about my choices than about, that end goal key, that internship will look good on my CV and will get me an
Yeah.
admission. I think a little out of the box, think a little in terms of, honest evaluation. I think an internship will help you. Like I say this all the time. If you're looking to do management, one of the most important questions on your why MBA, in your application is why do you want to do an MBA? And you know, day in and day out, B school admission panels will see people coming and say, I want to do marketing. And my first question to them, or marketing or finance, my first question to them is, how do you even know what happens in marketing if you haven't worked with a marketing firm, if you haven't worked at a trading desk? How do you know what finance looks like? Right. So this is something I would encourage you to think on these lines, right? Go experience the role for yourself, even if it's a month where you don't do anything, you're just observing somebody who's working. I think that will give you a fair idea of what the sector, what the role demands, and you'll be the wiser person, right? And when you put that on your application next time, you'll feel more confident about your chances in that field, right? And I think that's the big difference. All right. Rohini asks us, which programming language, in fact, she's very specifically pointed this at you. Which programming language would you recommend for economics students? I think that's a kind of a good one.
That's actually a good question. I mean, if you search what kind of programming languages are used in economics, you might see certain graphs, with bars of how many actually people prefer. But I would say more so, it kind of depends on what organization you're working for and what professor you're working for. Up until you do your own research, which will, so again, it dictates what your interests are. These days we have Python as well, but mostly you will, I mean, one software that you have to know if you are into economics is Stata, downright. I mean, there is no choice you have there, because that is something that is used by 98%, if not 100% of all the people who are doing research in economics. And Excel, basics of Excel are very required as well, because the data that you will download will always be in CSV format. And that is how you need to know to just work way around in Excel sometimes. So I think basics of Excel, sometimes you need to know the VBA programming and sometimes R as well. So I'll just give you one specific example for my work at RBI. I am much more comfortable with R, and my professor generally uses MATLAB. So I think I was selected on the basis that I will be able to learn MATLAB, and that I am already learning. But actually, so it happened yesterday itself. So the code was not working for Sir on MATLAB. So he asked me to do the same code in R. And I had to just switch and do it in R. So I think that is how you sometimes, if you have just the knack for programming, and sometimes if you just know how syntax works, I think that's easier. So having said that, I think some programming languages are easier to learn and easier to start with before you go on to learn something else. With Stata, it's way much more easier, because all you need to know is your theory of metrics, and everything else is up there, and you just have to click on buttons and do this, do that, and I think things will happen. You can also code in Stata. You can also define your own functions in Stata like you do in R, but that will be on a much more advanced level. And I think no one expects you to know that if you are at least not a graduate student. But if you know that, it certainly doesn't harm, and it will only boost your application, saying that, okay, I went to this length to study this particular, because I am actually interested in, analyzing things. And actually, one thing before I forget, so you get this website. I think there is one particular website that right now pops up in my mind. It's just called Analytics Vidya, and they will have certain data sets and codes, as well as the solutions to the questions that they will ask at the end. So I think you can always go and try on hands-on exercises to get comfortable with coding, even if it is not taught to you in your college specifically or in a degree that you're pursuing. You
Yeah, I
should
think
always try that,
that's a splendid.
because I think, yeah, logic is important. Logic and problem solving is something that you cannot compromise on in this field.
Wonderful. I think that answers that quite succinctly. All right, we have another question from Gurlal here. Gurlal says, well, it's more of a general question. He's saying, well, most universities in the US require a 4-year, accept a 4-year undergraduate. I think it's more,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, in terms of number of years of education.
Yeah.
So given that India's education system, a lot of programs are of 3-year duration, what does one do, right? In your experience?
Yeah, so I have one example of one of my dear friends actually. So I did a 3-year undergraduate, which was from UK, and she is currently into NYU for her master's in quantitative economics. So I think it certainly does not bog down that you cannot apply to any US universities, but there will be certain universities. So you can always actually, so what happens is sometimes even if you have a 3-year undergrad degree, you can email the admission committee to just check whether they will consider you in or not. And I think that there might sometimes be exceptions as well. So you'll never know until you try, and there's nothing to lose, I would say. So just shoot an email to the admission committee to check whether they do consider, even if they haven't specifically mentioned it on their website. So I think you should always do that. And second is, if not, then I think sometimes you can just ask them if you have a 3-year undergraduate degree, and this will vary from college to college. Sometimes they might take you if you have a 1-year work ex after a 3-year undergrad. Sometimes you might have to do a particular master's. So I think it sort of depends. So if you're talking about economics, there are not many universities that actually offer masters in economics in US. They directly offer you PhD, and right after undergrad, they will take you. So sometimes you will have to go down the route of doing a, let's say, 1-year or 2-year master's at the UK university and then applying for a PhD in US, if at all you want to go ahead.
Absolutely. I think that's the easier fix, is that in case the university is not able to, is not amenable to, your request, then what you do is you get a bridge course, right? You do a bridge course, maybe a correspondence course for a year, which gives you a degree, and then you use that to complete your, educational requirements. And that's something that happens all the time, Gurlal. I think it's one of the easier hurdles to cross, the number of years of education. The harder ones are actually the stronger profile and academic requirements. Okay, I think we've had a flurry of questions. People are getting tired, I presume. It's been a fabulous day. I had a lot of fun, handling, hearing from you, and also your journey, as exciting as that was, and the way that you handled the queries from students today, right? So thanks for your time, Kashmira. It's we certainly hope that you can make time again and come and help our audience like this again.
I'm honored to be here, and I guess interacting with you all today, because I think this is the most important thing that you can ever do. And these are free events. You should never ever miss such events, because you never know, one line said by a particular person might just change the way you think about a certain thing. So always be open minded and never, try to have a closed mind.
Right. Amazing. I'm going to leave you with a message, on our screen, which is thanks a lot for your time, guys, and we wish you all the very best. And just like before, a quick reminder: our network is entirely open for your benefit. Feel free to reach out to any mentor that you see there. All you need to do is book your appointment by registering by simply going ahead and clicking book, and visit mentorscapital.com and get your journey rolling. Right? Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay indoors, and all the very best.
Well, thanks once again to Mentors Capital for allowing me a platform. Thank you very much.
Pleasure was all ours.
And I hope you all enjoy every moment of the day.
Yeah.
And do stay safe.
Absolutely. Do let us know how you think this went. I think some of you would have seen our posts on LinkedIn and Instagram. So please comment. Do let us know how you think this went. If you have any more questions to ask of Kashmira ma'am, just shoot them on whatever platform you guys are on, or simply better still,
just call me Kashmira. Yeah.
Connect with her on Mentors Capital. And Kashmira, I think there's an alert for you. I think you're going to be flooded with a deluge of requests very soon. So I hope that
yeah, guys, just okay. Let me just say this out here. Just be patient, okay? I'm not very good with messages and all, and I tend to be busy with so many things. So just be patient. But I guess I'm more of not a messaging sort of a person. So I think it's just better to talk. So I think you can just message me about what exactly you're looking for and what proximate goal you want me to specifically address while we talk. So I think that will really help.
When you put in a request for a mentorship slot on our website, on our platform, I think one of the questions that we'll ask you is, whom do you want to speak to? Why do you want to speak to them? What are your questions? And what's your, what's your profile like what you've done?
Yeah.
So that will probably help Kashmira, at least formulate a thought before she can get in touch.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's our time. Have a great evening. Have a great day, guys. And we hope to see you guys again very, very soon in our next edition of MC Connect. Till then, stay safe and please be careful.
Continue to enjoy studies. I don't know.
Absolutely.